Hey, welcome to 12 Tone, check this out. It's a bit weird and pretty dramatic, but it sounds good, right? Well, I like it, and I'm just gonna assume you do too, but why? These two chords don't really have anything to do with each other in any traditional sense. There's no key that contains both of them, and there's no obvious relationship between the two, so what gives? Well, it all comes down to sharing. One thing music theorists like to do is look at pairs of chords and see how many notes they have in common. For instance, here's A major. It's got an A, a C sharp, and an E. If we look at F sharp minor, we see another A and another C sharp. We've just swapped out the E for an F sharp, and the fact that there's so many common tones means that movement between the two chords feels smooth and peaceful. We could also have gone to C sharp minor, which keeps the C sharp and the E, trading the A for a G sharp instead. These two chords have what are called a mediant relationship with A major, which means their roots are some kind of third away from A. And since chords are usually built out of stacks of thirds, it makes sense that moving up or down by that amount would get you to something that looks really similar. You're just moving to another point in the same stack. And as always, this brings up the question of chord functions. Chord functions are different jobs that specific chords in a key can do. Those functions are based on the behaviors of the notes in the chord, and since chords with a mediant relationship tend to have a lot of the same notes, they also tend to have the same functions. For instance, in the key of A major, the 1 chord has tonic function, meaning it's at rest, and its mediant chords, F sharp minor and C sharp minor, also usually have tonic function, partly because they just sound so much like A major. But just because two chords have a mediant relationship doesn't mean they're all that similar. The most obvious example is what's called modal interchange, where we borrow chords from different scales. For instance, in the key of A minor, there's an F major, and the two of those have a normal mediant relationship. However, if we use A major instead, we get this. And even though we've still got a third between the two roots, we've only got one common tone. The A stays the same, but where we'd expect a C sharp, the second chord gives us a C natural instead. And again, we can go in the other direction too, from A major to C major, which only keeps the E. These are examples of chromatic mediants, which are chords whose roots are a third apart but don't have as many common tones as you'd expect. These ones are still pretty understandable though, we're just borrowing some sounds from another scale. And since there's still mostly tonic function in that scale, there's still mostly tonic function here too. But we can make things weirder. Let's go back to our basic mediant chords. We had F sharp minor and C sharp minor, but what if we just made those major instead? They'd still be a third away, but we're changing one of the common tones, which again creates a chromatic mediant. Switching to C sharp major means we no longer have a shared E, just the C sharp, and switching to F sharp major means we don't even have a shared A anymore. These chromatic mediants sound a little more different because we can't explain them through something simple like modal interchange, but they can still serve as tonic function chords if you're not too picky. Here, listen to this. See? Beautiful. Okay, so let's review. We've seen C sharp major, C sharp minor, F sharp major, F sharp minor, C major, and F major. And it seems to me that that list is missing a couple members. What about C minor and F minor? These are the most distant ones, often called double chromatic mediants, because instead of the two common tones we expect, they have none. Zero. Nothing at all. So how do they sound? Well, let's start with C minor. This is weird. There's no way around that. It's kind of a spooky sound because everything's a bit off from where you'd expect. It's disjointed and a little uncomfortable. Plus, it's just got a lot of tritones in it. Tritones are a really dissonant interval, and if we look at the movement from one chord to another, we can find two of them. One from the A to the E flat, and the other from the C sharp to the G. These combine to make this movement sound pretty dark and unpleasant. F minor, though, is different. Check it out. This still has no common tones, but it sounds almost smooth. It feels big, dramatic, and compelling, but why? Well, first of all, there's no tritones. That helps, but it's more than that. If we look at the notes in F minor, we see that each of them is just a half step away from a note in A major. F is a half step above E, C is a half step below C sharp, and A flat is a half step below A. All the notes are neighbors, even if none of them are actually shared. These two chords are what's known as hexatonic poles, which sounds more like a property of magnets than music, but really all it means is a major chord and a minor chord with that sort of neighborly relationship. There's only one for any given chord, and the roots are always a major third apart. Overall, chromatic mediants are a nice way to add a little flair to a composition without sounding totally random. Of course, they work in minor too, with all the same kinds of relationships, just backwards. In fact, while we focused mostly on their functional uses, they're also really helpful tools in non-functional harmony to help provide some kind of structure without implying a strong sense of tonality, and all because they wouldn't share their notes. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you want to help make these videos possible, please consider supporting 12 Tone on Patreon. You can also join our mailing list to find out about new episodes, like, share, comment, subscribe, and keep on rockin'.